My father's hands were a map of his life, and the lines were filled with the grime of 50 years spent understanding engines. He laid one of those hands on the engine block of the old Ford and closed his eyes, listening to something I couldn't hear. He was getting weaker, and his heart was a tired machine, but his touch was still the same. I watched him, my own hands stained with the same grease from the same work. The garage was quiet for a moment, just the low sound of the engine and the faint smell of oil and gasoline that always felt like home to me. "Feel it, Calvin," he said without opening his eyes. "The vibration is wrong in the second cylinder. It's a story. You just have to learn the language." I put my hand where his had been and tried to feel what he felt. I could feel the rhythm of the pistons and the heat of the combustion, a logic that always made sense to me. My brother Roman walked in from the small office in the corner, holding a stack of papers. His hands were clean and his shirt had no stains on it, and he always looked like a visitor in his own home. "Dad, we need to talk about franchising," Roman said. "There are investors interested in the Voinovich name. We could have a dozen shops like this in 5 years." My father opened his eyes and took his hand off the engine. He looked at Roman's clean hands and then at his papers. "This is a garage, not a brand," my father said. "It is built with honest hands. That is something you cannot franchise. It is soft-handed fantasy." Roman's face tightened. He looked from our father to me, and the look in his eyes was old and bitter. He saw the grease on my hands and the pride in my father's expression, and I knew the words had struck him like a physical blow. He said nothing else, just turned and went back into the office. I didn't see him for the rest of the day, but later that evening, as we were closing up, I saw him through the office window. He was looking at a set of our father's old hand-drawn schematics for a custom transmission. He took a lighter from his pocket and clicked it on, the small flame reflecting in his eyes. He held it there for a long moment, then he clicked it off and carefully placed the drawings into his briefcase before snapping it shut. A week later, my father was gone. His heart finally gave out while he was working on that same old Ford, and he fell to the concrete floor he had stood on his entire life. The garage felt empty without him, a body without a soul. After the funeral, Roman called me into the office. He was wearing an expensive dark suit and sat behind our father's metal desk as if it were a throne. "I'm selling the business," he said. The words didn't make sense. I just looked at him. OmniDrive is buying everything. The name, the property, the contracts. "It's a good deal, Cal. It will set us up for life." "You can't," I said. This was his life. This is our legacy. "Legacy is a word for poor people," Roman said, his voice cold and flat. "Dad was a great mechanic, but he was a terrible businessman. He left us with debt and a dying trade. I am securing our future." I stood up, my fists clenched. "I won't let you do it. I'll fight you." He just looked at me with something like pity. "It's already done. I have power of attorney. The papers are being finalized." The next morning, I went to the shop and found a new chain and padlock on the door. Taped to the glass was a piece of paper with the OmniDrive logo at the top. It was a notice of preliminary acquisition assessment. I stood there in the cold morning air, reading the corporate words that felt like a foreign language, and realized I was locked out of my own home. The acquisition depended on one last thing: a final inspection to verify the shop's quality standards. Roman told me it was a formality, but that I had to be the one to do it, to show OmniDrive. The Voinovich standard was still alive. He needed me, and for a moment I thought maybe I could stop the sale if the inspection went perfectly, if I could prove our worth. I spent 2 days prepping the test vehicle, a classic muscle car, making sure every part was perfect. I was going to make that car sing a song only my father would have understood. The day of the inspection, I met the inspector, a man in a crisp OmniDrive uniform who barely looked at me. I got behind the wheel and started the engine. It felt right. I pulled out of the garage for the test drive with the inspector in the passenger seat. I took it through the gears, feeling the power and the smooth transition I had worked so hard to achieve. On the final stretch, a long downhill road, I pressed the brake pedal. It went straight to the floor. There was nothing there. The car kept accelerating, and the world became a blur of speed and panic. I fought the wheel, trying to keep the car on the road, but the turn at the bottom was too sharp. The world became the sound of screaming tires and then the violent crash of metal and shattering glass. I woke up in a police interrogation room. My head ached and my arm was in a sling. A detective told me I was being charged with gross negligence and reckless endangerment. He said the inspector was in the hospital. He said they found a counterfeit brake line component in the wreckage, a cheap part that never would have passed a real inspection. I told him it was impossible, that I checked everything myself. He just smiled a tired smile and pointed to the small television mounted in the corner of the room. A news report was on. My brother Roman stood in front of our garage, his face a mask of sorrow. He spoke to a crowd of reporters, his voice breaking. He said he was heartbroken but was forced to sever all ties with his criminal brother, whose greed and shoddy work had destroyed their family's good name. I watched him lie, and I felt the cold floor of the world fall out from under me. I was completely and utterly alone. They released me a day later with charges pending. The news report had done its job. I was a pariah. As I walked toward the garage, I saw a crew of workers taking down the old sign. The letters of Voinovich and Son Motors came off one by one, leaving a faded outline on the brick. They replaced it with a new, sterile sign that just said OmniDrive. I knew then that my old life was over. Calvin Voinovich was a ghost. That night, I went to my small apartment and packed a single bag. I emptied my bank account, which wasn't much, and took a bus to the Social Security office where I reported my wallet and identification stolen. I walked out with a temporary paper ID bearing a new name. I destroyed the old one. The only things I kept from my past life were a set of my father's old tools, the ones with the worn wooden handles shaped by his grip. I went to the bus station, a big, dirty place for people who wanted to disappear. I bought a one-way ticket to a city I'd never heard of. As the bus pulled out of the station, leaving my whole world behind, I reached into my bag and took out my father's heaviest wrench. I held it in my hands, the cold, solid weight of it a comfort. I gripped it until my knuckles turned white, a silent promise in the humming darkness of the bus. The acquisition felt less like a celebration and more like a surrender. Our small lab, full of brilliant people who cared about the work, was absorbed by OmniDrive over a single weekend. They gave us new keycards and login credentials and a welcome packet that explained our stock options would vest in 5 years, which was their way of buying your silence and your future. This was my plan, a decade and a half in the making, and it had worked perfectly. I had identified the 3 most likely labs OmniDrive would purchase for their AI diagnostic systems, and I worked my way into the most critical position at the one with the weakest financial standing. I made myself the engineer they could not afford to lose in the transition. They gave me a cubicle on the 17th floor of their North American headquarters, a sterile box with a view of other sterile boxes in the building across the street. The first thing I did was open the internal employee directory. I typed the name, and a face I knew better than my own appeared on the screen. Older now, with lines of confidence around the eyes and a smile that never reached them. Roman Voinovich, VP of Global Development. The hunt was on. A week later, the memo about the Helios project audit circulated. You could feel the tension change in the department because everyone knew Helios was Roman's baby, the project that would make him CEO. Budget overruns were just the official story. The real story was that the technology was a lie and the numbers had to be tortured until they confessed. My department head, a man whose entire posture was an apology, came to my cubicle. He explained that a top-tier auditor was coming down from corporate and she would need a technical liaison. He assigned me the job because I was the new expert on the legacy systems they had just acquired, and because nobody else wanted to be anywhere near the blast radius. He wanted me to be a buffer, a guide who could answer her questions and get her out of our hair as quickly as possible. I accepted without comment. Back at my terminal, I sent a single encrypted character, a period, to an address that looked like digital noise. It was for Pops, my father's oldest friend, my only connection left to the world I had lost. Then I pulled up the auditor's file. Hawa Namani. Her record was a perfect staircase of promotions and commendations. Then I found an old article from a business journal about a corporate disaster at another company years ago, and a footnote mentioned her father, an engineer who had been scapegoated for a structural failure. I looked at her picture again, at the quiet intensity in her eyes, and a cold feeling settled in my gut. She was not just an auditor doing a job. She was a hunter, just like me. Our first meeting was in a small, windowless conference room. Hawa was direct, and her questions were like surgical instruments, each one designed to find a single nerve. I gave her the data she requested, guiding her through the convoluted architecture of the R&D servers. I built a narrative for her, a story told in file access logs and budget allocation codes. The story pointed toward a mid-level project manager, a man I knew was skimming from the travel budget. It was a plausible crime, small enough to be believable and big enough to satisfy an audit. Over the next few days, I earned her respect with my technical knowledge, answering every question with a precision that left no room for doubt. That Saturday, I went into the office to plant the final pieces of evidence on the scapegoat's personal network drive. The server room was cold, and the machines produced a constant, low sound. I had just finished fabricating the last transfer record when the door hissed open. It was Hawa. She stopped, surprised to see me. I felt a surge of adrenaline, but my face remained calm. We stood in silence for a moment in the chilled air, the rows of blinking server lights reflecting in her eyes. The encounter was tense, but something else passed between us. A shared understanding of people who find clarity in late hours and hard work. The next week, she exposed the manager. He was fired quietly. The R&D head was relieved. Roman even sent Hawa a commendation. She had won, but I could see a flicker of doubt in her expression as she left the office that evening. She looked back at my cubicle, just for a second. Later that night, I saw a system query flag on my monitoring software. It was Hawa, running a low-level background check on Karl Novak. The system returned the result I had spent years building. Identity verified. No anomalies detected. Her suspicion lingered. A few days later, she came to my desk holding a tablet. She had been digging through the deep archives, looking for patterns, and she had found an old acquisition file that was corrupted. The system had flagged it as unreadable, a piece of digital garbage from 15 years ago. The file name was just a string of alphanumeric characters, but my heart stopped when I saw the date. She asked if I could help her recover it, since I was the expert on restoring data from outdated systems. I had no choice but to agree. I sat next to her at her terminal, my hands moving with calm expertise while my mind screamed. I meticulously reconstructed the file, fragment by fragment, forcing myself to be the detached engineer as the record of my own life's ruin slowly materialized on the screen. The name appeared first, Voinovich and Son Motors. Then came the inspection report, the one that mentioned faulty wiring and a compromised hydraulic lift. The lies that had branded my father a fraud and me a saboteur. I saw the final payout to the inspector, the man who had worked for OmniDrive all along. Hawa was leaning in, her focus absolute, her integrity a weapon pointed at my past. She was getting too close, and I knew I had to create a bigger fire to distract her from this one. That night, from a secure terminal in my apartment, I leaked a single data packet to a tech journalist I had cultivated for years. It was a core engineering spec from the Helios project, irrefutable proof that the battery was fundamentally unstable. The next morning, the world knew. OmniDrive stock went into a freefall. At her desk, Hawa stared at her screen, the name Voinovich, now perfectly clear in the recovered file. Across the city, in his penthouse office, Roman's phone lit up with a high-priority security alert. Unauthorized data leak detected. Helios project. The building felt different the next day. The rules of survival were suddenly being enforced with brutal efficiency. Roman implemented a new security AI that monitored all network activity, flagging any behavior that deviated from established patterns. Every keycard swipe was logged, every file access cross-referenced. I was locked out. The final piece of evidence I needed, The unredacted financial transfer from Roman's personal slush fund to the inspector was on a server I could no longer reach. Roman knew the leak came from R&D, and he was hunting for the source. He was also hunting Hawa. I did not see their confrontation, but I saw her afterward. She returned to her desk, her face pale but her jaw set with a new, harder resolve. Later, I pulled up a security file on Roman and saw a picture of him in his office. On the wall behind him was a small, framed piece of wood, burned with a quote from our father. "Soft-handed fantasy," it read. The words my father had used to dismiss Roman's business school ambitions. It was the source of his poison. That evening, I stayed late, running simulations to find a way past the new security. I had a security camera feed open on a secondary monitor, a habit for maintaining situational awareness. I watched as Hawa left the building and walked toward the parking garage. A moment later, I saw Roman's security chief follow her. He leaned down by her car, his movements quick and professional, and when he straightened up and walked away, I knew he had placed a tracker on it. My attempt to divert her, to protect her, had made her his primary target. The board demanded a body. The stock was still plummeting, and the Helios launch was in jeopardy. Roman needed to give them a traitor, a clean and simple answer to a complex problem. He chose Hawa. Using his executive-level access, he moved through the network like a ghost, fabricating a digital trail with an artist's precision. He created logs showing a data transfer from the R&D servers to an external account, an account he then linked to Hawa with a forged financial record. The next afternoon, the news broke across the internal network. Hawa Inamani was suspended indefinitely, pending a federal investigation into corporate espionage. Security guards flanked her as she packed her desk, escorting her from the building in full view of the entire floor. It was a public execution. Watching her walk away, stripped of her dignity and her career, was like watching my own past play out on someone else. I went back to my apartment and bypassed the security AI with a physical exploit I had designed for just this moment, a dangerous maneuver that left a tiny momentary hole in the firewall. It was enough. I downloaded the final file, the unredacted bank transfer that proved everything. It was all there on my screen, the entire story from a small family garage to a global conspiracy. I had won. My encrypted messenger blinked with an incoming transmission. It was from Pops. "The old guard is listening. Say the word." I had the power to burn Roman to the ground. But I just stared at a news broadcast on my monitor, at a picture of Hawa's ruined, defiant face, and I could not move. The files sat on my main screen, a neat collection of icons that represented 15 years of my life. Proof of everything, from the $5,000 transfer that bought a crooked inspector to the engineering logs that proved the Helios battery was a bomb waiting to happen. The complete history of my brother's ascent was right there, and I had the power to detonate it all. I thought about sending the package to the journalist, a single click that would start the fire, but my hand would not move. Exposing Roman now would just make me look like Hawa's accomplice, a desperate act to save a co-conspirator. I saw her face as the guards led her away, the disbelief hardening into a cold fury that I knew too well. Quinn's words came back to me, the old engineer telling me some people are just built wrong. I had spent all this time focused on my brother, but I had become just like him, a man who saw other people as acceptable losses. The cold satisfaction I had imagined for this moment was gone, replaced by a deep, aching void. Revenge was not enough. I copied the entire evidence package onto a secure drive, then encrypted the original files on my server with a key that would erase them in 1 hour. I put on my jacket, slid the drive into my pocket, and left the apartment. I was not going to the press. I was going to Hawa's. Her apartment was on the 3rd floor of a brick building in a quiet neighborhood. The lights were on. I buzzed her unit and she answered over the intercom, her voice tired and sharp. "Who is it?" "It's Karl Novak. I need to talk to you." There was a long silence, then the lock on the main door clicked open. I walked up the stairs and found her door ajar. She stood in the entrance, wearing a simple gray sweatshirt and looking at me with undisguised contempt. Her living room was neat, with books organized on shelves and papers spread across her dining table in what looked like a failed attempt to build her own defense. She had 48 hours before OmniDrive filed the official charges. "You have 5 minutes to explain why I shouldn't call the police," she said. I walked in and she closed the door behind me. I took the drive from my pocket and set it on her table. I told her everything, starting with the garage and my father and a brother who valued ambition more than family. I explained how Roman framed me, how I disappeared and built a new identity with the single goal of getting inside OmniDrive. I told her how I used her, how I planted the evidence against the manager to keep her away from the real story. Her face was a mask, her expression unreadable as I confessed my entire life to her. When I finished, she just stood there, her arms crossed. Then she walked to the door and opened it. "Get out." I left without another word. I walked for hours through the city with no destination, a ghost with nowhere left to haunt. My phone vibrated in my pocket. It was her. "I pulled the property records for the shell corporation Roman used to pay the inspector 15 years ago," she said. Her voice all business now. "OmniDrive's holding company bought it a week before the inspection. It checks out. Roman's press conference to launch Helios is in 36 hours. What's the plan?" We met at an all-night diner, a place with cracked vinyl booths and weak coffee. The public stage of the press conference was our only chance to get the truth out before the official narrative hardened into fact. She knew the internal network, the specific servers and file directories that controlled the auditorium's massive presentation screen. I knew the security protocols, the access credentials, and the physical architecture of the building. We would swap Roman's polished corporate presentation with our evidence package. Getting her into the building was the first problem, since her keycard was deactivated and her face was flagged in the security system. I made a call, a number I had not used in years. It was Pops, who still ran a small garage out in the industrial district. I told him what I needed, and he just said he would be there. The next afternoon, we walked into the OmniDrive tower. I used my credentials to sign Hoa in as a technical consultant for the event, a risk that made the security guard look at us for a long moment before waving us through. We separated in the main lobby. She headed for the network hub on the 5th floor while I went to the auditorium. Just as we planned, a fire alarm went off in the west wing, a small electrical short in a maintenance closet. I saw a team of men in plain work uniforms, the old guard, move with quiet purpose toward the disruption, pulling security personnel away from the central monitoring stations. In the confusion, I used a terminal to briefly reactivate Hua's credentials, giving her a 5-minute window. She was in the server room now, the cold air blasting from the cooling fans as she navigated to Roman's presentation file. I watched the progress on my phone. The upload was at 99% when she sent a message. Footsteps outside. Keycard in the lock. Roman took the stage to a wave of applause from investors and the press. He was the picture of confidence, his expensive suit perfectly fitted, his smile radiating control. He walked to the podium and began his speech, talking about the future and innovation and the dawn of a new era. He clicked the remote to start the presentation. The massive screen behind him flickered, but instead of the OmniDrive logo, it displayed a scanned document, a 15-year-old inspection report from a garage called Voinovich and Son Motors. Roman faltered, his words catching in his throat. The next slide was a bank statement showing the illegal payment. Then came the raw data proving the Helios battery was a fire risk, followed by his own internal emails ordering the security team to fabricate evidence against Hawa Namani. The room was silent for a second. Then the reporters' cameras started flashing, a storm of light consuming the man on the stage. Roman was frozen in the spotlight, his empire disintegrating in real time. From the back of the auditorium, I watched his ruin. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Hawa. "They're coming for you now. Go." Months later, I stood in a clean, well-lit auto shop, the air smelling of new parts and solvent instead of old grease. The new sign over the wide garage door read, Voinovich Technologies. I had used what was left of my father's legacy, not to rebuild the past, but to create something new that honored his principles with modern tools. I slid out from under a vehicle, wiping my clean hands on a rag, and saw Hawa walking in. She was holding 2 cups of coffee. Her name had been cleared, and her testimony had been the foundation of the federal case against OmniDrive. Roman was gone, buried under a mountain of lawsuits and criminal charges. She handed me a coffee. "I got a call from the U.S. Attorney's Office," she said. "They have some questions about a systems engineer named Karl Novak." I looked at her, and for the first time in as long as I could remember, a genuine, unafraid smile crossed my face. I took the coffee. "Let's go talk to them."